Hello, my name is Basil Kittler, and my Studio One project was the Endless Dungeon. This project was a procedural project, meaning that each time you play and each time the level is built, it is unique and different, opposed to just being a fully set, dressed out level. The Endless Dungeon is basically a maze, and that maze increases with difficulty as you go through checkpoints and as you venture through it. It's a puzzle. It's set in a RPG-esque setting and focuses on maze navigation. The real key features that we were going to highlight here is the endless pathways and how you can just keep going through the maze endlessly, the randomized rooms along with the assets, and the goals that are placed throughout these dungeons. To start out with, I took my inspiration from lava tubes and those kinds of cave systems where they're natural and were eroded away by nature. Obviously, I couldn't just do that, but that's where the core inspiration came from. The From there, once I had that image in mind, I had to start with something, and that something was kind of the skeleton of the system. And to do that, we I made a bare bone kind of hallway that would just spider web out chunk after chunk to sprawl out into this maze. And that was the proof of concept, but also the basis of this project, as you can see. From that point, we needed to do the art, and I wanted to make something that not only functioned but looked good. So the key point here is that I needed the unique layouts to be seamless, to not be visually repetitive, and to transition from area to area in a way that isn't jarring. To do this, I thought of kind of randomized spawn zones for different assets, having variants of meshes, so like making meshes that have sliders to change their shape and all that. Um, and then as far as the materials go, I wanted to use like dithering, pixel offset, virtual texture material blending, all that sort of thing that people use to implement high res assets like megascans and stuff to blend them into the environment more seamlessly. So at that point, I kind of started doing that and started fleshing that out together. And before the beautiful corner, which was the middle of the project, so about week 5, I realized we were not getting the unique outcome that we really needed. To resolve that, I needed to break it up further. So what I did is I took each zone, so each section, whether we turn right or turn left or go straight, I took those and decided to make them individually themed. That would be, this one's a cave system. This one's like a sewer system. This one's like a dungeon hallway. And every time, based on other variables, they would be assigned these different themes, and this skeleton, this bare bone area, would generate assets to fill it based on those themes. And I had, 4 of them, but the premise behind it is I could make unlimited of them and just keep adding more and more. But with time constraints, limited myself to 4. And that's what I provided for the beautiful corner, was these 4 kind of themed hallways. At this point, I started to dabble with the asset decoration where bringing in assets, but this was sort of a challenge because there's 2 sort of ways you can do it. One is you design rules for each asset, and the other is you have collections of assets that you just throw in there. I was trying to give each asset individual rules, and I did that for the rocks, but it's so time consuming, and for this scale of a project in this time frame it really didn't work, and I couldn't scale it out that much because we're talking tons of time invested in each individual asset to develop these rules, and it just wasn't fitting for this. So, from taking that feedback from the middle of the project, halfway done, I decided a new idea, or a new, it's not really a new idea, but I decided to go a route of adding overlays to each set. So I made an exact copy of the set of each area and each chunk, and set dressed them individually. So they would be set dressed to, this is where all the rocks would be. This is one version of that. This is two versions, and so on. Just keeps spanning out. And do that with each individual asset. And then once the areas spawned, adding different overlays together on top of each other randomly to ultimately come up with a unique thing. Well, it's not as procedural as if you decided to make rules for each individual asset. It achieved our goals for this project and was ultimately the way we had to go for here. The end result is really what you're seeing here. I spent the last 2, maybe 3 weeks really just perfecting, well, one, the lighting system, but then also just adding more and more assets and more variations of these overlays on top of what was already here. Because once I built this system, it was really just a matter of adding more and more and more to it in order to give it life and believability. And ultimately, I think it succeeded. I'm very proud of this. I set out to make an endless dungeon at the start, and that has been accomplished. And it looks very cohesive and achieves all these goals. If I was to start over, so like something I kind of learned going through this is I wish that, well, one, I wish I had more time, and if I was to invest more time into this, I would go back and build it up from the foundation with these rules that we were talking about. Instead of doing the overlays, I would love to dive into this, doing individual rules for each asset. So, like, the dungeon spirals deeper, and I'd love to configure rules like as you go deeper, there's more assets like this, or there's more chance of there being cave themed areas. I'd also really like to say, like, near the fire, the water, like wetness or moisture is like further away from the fire, and there's more plants in the darker areas, or mushrooms, or just something like that. And I feel like that would ultimately give a product that is beyond what it would be more, but it does not fit into this time frame. And that's really my sort of one thing that I kind of really focused on. It was this branch, and it was this compromise I had to make halfway through the project in order to actually achieve it. And that's my postmortem. uh Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear any kind of feedback you have, and thank you.